I've been known to make some Terraria builds in my time. I mean, just off the top of my head, I made like a cool medieval castle. That's one of my favorite builds I've ever done. And that had an accompanying kind of like wizard tower, awesome alchemist area thing. I made a dope-ass underground, like, steampunk bunker that I know none of you watched, but I still think that's a really good build. I made some kind of Japanese temple/houses inspired base. I think, again, that one was a really cool build. And yes, I remember this exists. I also started a series a long-ass time ago that I never continued of making biome-specific houses, and I swear, I promise you, I will continue that series. I am just super, super lazy. That will continue. I know you guys like that video. So I feel that I might be slightly, just a smidge qualified to make this into a series. I've been thinking about doing this for a super long time, but what I want to do is rank some of your Terraria builds coming from a Terraria builder myself. Now, I should preface this entire thing by saying Terraria building, much like any other form of art, is subjective. I think I'm a decent Terraria builder. Am I the best? No. Am I, like, probably a little bit above the middle tier? I would say so, but maybe you guys don't think so, and that's totally fine. It is completely subjective. You can think I'm absolute dog water, washed up slop Terraria builder, and that could be totally fine. But at the same time, I see a lot of people just getting into Terraria, being beginner builders and asking for advice, asking for tips, and personally, I think that I could potentially help them, you know, because I think my builds look pretty cool for the most part. Maybe you guys do too. I mean, you guys seem to like the speed build videos whenever I do them sporadically. And low-key, at the end of the day, I think this could also just be a really fun, cool community thing to do with you guys. Maybe if you are Terraria builders yourselves, or you want to send some builds my way, maybe you can email them to me. I could critique them or rate them, or we could just talk about building, you know, anything really. I think that could be a lot of fun. So, gamers, what we are going to do today is look in the Terraria subreddit and just take a look at all the builds there, and we're gonna see what we find. Alright, so here we are in the r/Terraria official subreddit, and I just have it filtered by builds, so we're just straight up gonna scroll down and see what builds we see already. First one here, My Winter City, bro. Let's check this shit out. So right off the bat, I gotta say, this is a very big build. I really like it. I feel like I struggle a lot personally in building the scope of it, right? Like I usually do like maybe 1 or 2 big buildings, but I never do like this and make like a full actual town. I think this looks really, really good. Right here, this is a super, super nice detail. I'll go ahead and actually, whoops. I didn't realize I could turn it to 1080p, bro. I was looking at this shit in like, what, 144p this whole time? Damn. Okay, this looks way better now. You can see with the Red Dynasty shingles, they kind of did like an overhang above the doorway. I think that looks really good. Another thing they did that I really appreciate is these staircases here in this first house. They tried to add some rope, some silk rope, to be the railing of the staircase, and that is a really, really cool thing. However, this is a really cool trick that I learned a long time ago when I was first getting into building, but I think it's just good to spread it around because it's a really nice building technique. So I went ahead and created a little bit of the room in my own building world here. And just to show you guys, right now, the railing more or less looks like this. I got the wrong kind of rope, my bad. The railing for this staircase currently looks a bit like this. I mean, you know, more or less, because the rest of the house is also more complete. And this works. You know, this gets the point across. This is easily a railing. But a nice building tip you can use is actually to use minecart like this, because you can put the minecart down diagonally. That's on the wrong block. You can put the minecart on diagonally, and look at that. Now it looks exactly like it's some sort of metal railing held up by these wooden sticks. And if you continue this and go down all the way, you can make one that goes out like this, hammer it down, and look at that. It looks exactly like the ending of a railing that you would see going up the stairs. The only one downside to this technique is you technically can't have this platform be one solid platform. You would have to break one of these blocks of platform so you can have the railing go up diagonally. But with that, there are certain background walls or maybe even other items you can use to hide that gap. For instance, what I like to do a lot is I use rich mahogany walls and I slap that in there, and it looks a bit bad right here because usually I would paint this brown, but if you do paint this brown, it hides the gap pretty well. Or similarly, in a style build like this, you could actually just use boreal wood walls, and that pretty seamlessly connects the two colors, so it is a bit noticeable that there's a gap, but especially if you have more decorations going on at the house, it really does cover it up pretty well. And there we go, look at that, now your railing is looking like a true Terraria professional. Of course, that's just in my opinion, but if you want to do something to elevate this build even more, I do have 2 more steps that you could use that I personally think would make this look really, really good as a nice little room. And the first thing is just to physically connect this railing to the rest of the build, because obviously right now, you can clearly tell this is a railing to a set of stairs, like very obviously. However, what you can actually do is you can take something like rich mahogany fence, or in this case, we're going to use palm wood fence, and all you got to do is put some palm wood fence here at the bottom, and simply connect up the railway like this. Now, this is going to do two things for you. For one, since it's fenced, it's going to let in a little bit of natural light, which I always like to have in my builds. And two, now that you can see it's connected physically, you can really easily tell, oh wow, that's a physical solid rail that I can grab, I can put my hands on that, I can shake it all around. More or less, you know, this is still Terraria. Now, for me personally, my go-to block for any kind of scenario like this is always going to be rich mahogany, and the reason we're not using rich mahogany right now is because the color is a little bit disassociated with the rest of the build. Now, for this build in particular, I'm not going to be using any sort of paint because if you're a new Terraria builder, paint is a very daunting thing. You know, you don't know what colors are going to look good, you don't know what blocks to use with what paints, so if you're completely new to building, all you got to do is focus on what the color looks like, and then just match it up as best you can. So in our instance, we're going to go ahead and use palm wood because look at that. I think it matches just a little bit better. It's more of a brown color, so I think it complements it pretty well, and it honestly just looks pretty good. So, you got your wall, you got your railing, now what? What is the third and final step that you can do to absolutely elevate this build? And that is one simple yet very crucial to understand technique, which is depth. Depth is very hard to do in a game like this, of course being a 2D game, especially because there are so many options for background walls. What do you do to add depth? What items can you put in? What decorations can you use? It's very daunting. I might make a future video on it just talking about walls and adding depth to your builds. However, in our case, there is one simple, crucial thing to understand. The stairs is one thing, and the background wall is another. Mind fucking blown. I know. So for me personally, if we're dealing with a simple room like this, I like to think of it in two separate planes. We have the background wall, or like the regular room of whatever room this is. Does that make sense? It'll make sense. I'll make it make sense. And then we have the stairs. And of course, what I'm about to say is complete matter of preference. This is how I personally like to separate my builds and visualize it, but you guys don't have to do this if you don't want to. You could leave this all as one room, so to speak, by just having one simple background wall and not like separating the build whatsoever. But what I like to do personally is I like to have a bit of a separation in the underside of the stairs and then the rest of the background wall for like the main room. So here's what I'm talking about. In our case, we're actually going to use layered dirt wall because yet again, we're doing a no paint for this build, and I think layered dirt wall is going to complement the rest of the build while still being distinctly different. And all we're going to do is we're going to replace the background wall behind the stairs with this layered wall, and I'm going to tell you what that's going to do after I show it. And that's literally all we're doing. Now, it might look a little bit strange when you're first seeing it, but I'm going to try and explain it to you so you guys can process it in your mind and understand. So what I'm choosing to look at this room to be like is this is the background wall of the main room. You know, this is the main room. This is where the stairs are. But then over here is actually going to be a foreground element. So basically, you can think of it like you're walking into the house, right? You're walking in, and then bam, now you're in this room and you kind of go down horizontally. So it's almost like this room is now a bit of an L shape instead of just the regular single room box that it was before. And you can actually even take this a little bit further because as you can see, we have some accents on the ground here. But what happens if we change those accents to say something like living wood wall, another very early game material you can get very easily? If we just simply change the accents on the ground, then look at that. Yet again, it looks like a completely different room, which adds even more depth to the build. And now personally, this is all I would probably do to this build. If I was really feeling frisky, I might also add some support beams, maybe something like here, just to show you guys, or maybe even along the doorways here. But other than that, I would say that this room has now been elevated way above what it could have potentially been as just a normal box. And all we did is add some relatively simple and super early game background walls to give it just that little bit more of depth. So now let's take this example and once again just compare it to the original build from this submitter, and you guys can see, truly, it is not a bad room. Everything is here, and honestly, the building techniques are pretty good here. However, you can see there's a drastic difference in the railing, and personally for me, I do like adding that little bit of depth to this room, which this room, in my opinion, just lacks a little bit of. All in all, I would say that this whole thing is a really great build. Like, I really appreciate this. I enjoy this. You guys can even see, as the build goes down here, these houses look super, super cozy and really nice. So honestly, just keep building. This is awesome. And by the way, this is what I kind of want this video series to be. That is, if this does become a video series. I want to look at some of your really cool builds and then give my personal thoughts on them and see if I can improve them in any way, or maybe just help some of you guys if you guys are struggling with building or want some ideas on different techniques and stuff, because I want to share the love. You know, I think, again, I'm a decent Terraria builder. I think I do have a lot of cool tips and tricks that maybe you guys would like and incorporate into your builds. And yo, speaking of tips and tricks, take a look at this Terraria build. First off, he's doing this on Terraria Mobile, which is like, holy shit, insane. I could not imagine building anything on Terraria Mobile. Like, that is highly impressive that you could even do anything. I'm so bad on that. But take a look at this outside area. This is perfect. So simple, and yet it gets the point across so beautifully. This is an outdoor patio. We have a bit of a wall, maybe it even looks like hay wall or something to fit the theme of the rest of the build. We have a nice supporting beam with a little bit of a roof and a lantern. Small little things like this really bring life to your Terraria build, and honestly, I think this is perfect. There could be ways to improve this. Like, personally, I might even put a bit of a background wall across this platform to give the roof a little bit more depth. Oh, there goes Tetsyumi talking about depth again, but I mean just like to make the roof a little bit bigger, a little bit more set into the build, if you will. But this is great. I like all the techniques he used. He's using a little bit of a different thing for the ceiling. He's using some support beams, which, you know me, I love my support beams in my builds. This is a great little desert house. Oh, I think we found a good one. Not here to show off because my headquarters suck. How can I improve them? Now, first off, this is a nice build, and it looks like this guy's also been getting some helpful comments by the rest of the Terraria building community, so really, I don't even have to say much, but I will put in my 2 cents, and that is, I think realistically, what this guy could do to significantly improve this Terraria build is only 2 things: furniture and what I would call structure. Let me explain. I went ahead and recreated just a small section of this guy's build. Now, the dimensions aren't perfect, but I think this gets the point across. So you can already tell here that this guy did already put in some decorations. The problem, I think, is that for one, it's localized to pretty much just this one small area, and 2, they kind of just feel a bit randomly thrown about with no real coherence, with not much plan of where to put them. So for these tips in particular, what I want to emphasize is that if you have a particular decoration or like theme of the room you want to go for, what you should do is put down other things around it to complement whatever theme that is. For instance, in the original build, this guy has a bookshelf down right under this painting, and to me personally, this is already a pretty good amount of decorations in this one area, so all you gotta do is maybe try and add a bench. Adding a bench next to the bookcase can make it look like, oh cool, this is a chill area where I can just sit down, read a book, admire some paintings, and look at that, already, this little corner of the build seems like it's much more complete. Similarly, and I want to say this now before we do anything else, glass walls count as decoration. Like, you can just add in a bunch of glass walls, put some windows everywhere in your build, and now look at that. Immediately, the space is opened up, you get some nice daylight shining through. Don't underestimate the power of simply putting in transparent blocks. So look at that. Already these rooms are nice and opened up. They're starting to get a bit of a structure built in, which we haven't even discussed yet. So now there's only a few more things that honestly I would tweak about this. First things first, now that we have these glass windows, it wouldn't really make sense to have any of these pictures hanging off the windows, so we do have to temporarily relocate these pictures. But wait a minute, Tetsyumi, I worked hard on getting those paintings. I want to be able to put them where I want. Well, luckily, you actually still can. For one, I think honestly a picture would just probably look good right there, so look at that. That doesn't even interfere with the window. You can still relatively put that in the same location. But let's say for whatever reason, you need to put this cool epic ass skull picture right there in the middle of the room, right on this window. Well, that wouldn't really look good unless maybe this isn't connected to the window. Maybe this painting is actually hanging from the ceiling. And this is where you can have some rope or even some chain come in, and look at that. Now, this painting still looks connected with the rest of the room, but it doesn't look out of place being slapped right on top of the window. Unfortunately, no, this trick doesn't really work that well with these 2 wide paintings because they kind of need that one solid middle block for you to actually hang the rope from. But honestly, these paintings are kind of small enough anywhere that you can put these anywhere. And you know what? I noticed in the original build, there's some platforms right here against the wall. Why not go ahead and make that like an impromptu shelf and put the painting right on top of there? And honestly, just with those few small tweaks, this room already looks like a nice, cozy reading and or like workshop area that you can put in pretty much any build unanimously. However, there's one more thing that is important to know when you're making any sort of room in Terraria, and that is what the purpose of the room is actually going to be. Now, of course, you can just have a room sort of like this, where it's a little bit of everything, right? You got a bookshelf, you got some workstations, you got some paintings, and that's totally fine. But if you want to really bring your builds together, and especially if you have a ton of different rooms and you don't quite know what to do with them, choose one certain thing that you want that room to be and then decorate around it. For instance, in this room, I see that you already have some workstations, right? There's a furnace, there's a crafting table, even a little chair so you can kind of sit at it like a workshop. Why don't we make this room sort of like a blacksmithing area? And to do that actually would be pretty simple. All we really have to do is add maybe like a mannequin in this corner here, add some blacksmithing tools, and look at that. I would say with those simple 2 more decorations added, now this area looks cohesive. Why do I keep trying to say that word? I don't know what I'm talking about. This area looks cohesive, it looks like it's its own thing, and then it still has all this other decoration so you can showcase the spoils of your mining. So let's go ahead and do a similar thing with this completely empty room over here. It's a little bit easier to decorate a room when you have some idea of what you want to put in it. For instance, for this one, it was the paintings in the bookshelf. But what about this? This is a completely blank canvas. What do we make this room? Well, this can be anything, but you already got the NPC table and the NPC chair, so clearly this is some kind of NPC room. Why don't we make this like a cafeteria or a bar? And to do that would still be extremely simple and something you could do in like day 3 of your Terraria world. Again, with absolutely no paint. Paint is a little bit daunting of a thing for newer players. So again, you can do everything in Terraria with no paint. You just got to do a little bit of creativity. So in our case, how about we get some of these bars, banquet tables, and kegs, and we make this sort of an impromptu bar. So first off, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to put 2 bars next to each other. Now, it might look a bit awkward right now, of course, but how about now we put a keg on top of one? We can put a bottle right next to it to signify, hey, maybe if you want to pour some glasses, you know, they got a bit of ale right here. Next thing I'd probably do is maybe just remove those basic wooden tables, and again, just put some banquet tables down with some stools next to them, because stools, honestly, in my opinion, just look a little bit better with the banquet tables specifically, but of course, you can choose anything you want. I just like the stools. And I also realized having 2 tables kind of right next to each other here didn't really look too good, so I just deleted it and put down one single table. That's another thing you guys always gotta remember. This is a game. You know, this is a video game. You can tear shit down, you can build shit back up. If you don't like how something looks, just get rid of it. You know, it's a game. It's just some blocks. You can always put it back. You can always build it up better or the same if you really wanted to. Now, in my case, I am going to build it back just a little bit differently because you know what? I figured out I don't really like these 2 bars next to each other. So instead, we're going to do, again, a bit of perspective trickery. And instead of having this be 2 bars sideways like this, how it was before, instead, we're going to act like this bar actually extends down instead of horizontally. And we can do that with just a little bit, again, of trickery of the mind, right? So we can take some wooden platforms here, and we can go ahead and put one down like this, and then simply put a stool next to it. So already, this kind of looks like the bar is extending downwards, and maybe you can kind of infer that there's more stools and more bar that goes on behind this one. But in my opinion, if you really want to elevate this and make this look even better, what you can do is put one more platform down on the ground and hammer this in to the first set of stairs to make it look like a footrest that you would see going down on a bar. So now if we take a step back and look at this by itself, I could pretty clearly tell that, hey, this is a bar and it actually goes down the long way instead of horizontally like you would see in most Terraria builds. And of course, we can also add some finishing touches. We saw that there was a chandelier in this other room over here, so hey, why not add a chandelier in this room? And this is a tip I cannot stress enough. Do not underestimate the power of background wall placeables. You saw a little bit with these pictures over here, like you can hang these pictures. We can do the same thing with some simple things like signs, right? You can put some signs up anywhere and automatically, I would say that still adds a good bit of depth to your build. But what I'm personally going to choose is actually to put the sign slightly overlapping this window to, yet again, add just a little bit more depth. And truthfully, as far as decoration goes, I would probably even call this room complete. Now, there are some other things you could do. You could maybe put some shelves on up here by just like making some platforms up here and who knows, like putting even like a cooking pot or something in the middle there. But realistically, you don't have to do much to make all these rooms look lived in and look really good. However, that also immediately goes into our next tip, which is simply to add structure to these rooms and to your builds. This can be seen as a pretty basic tip, but maybe if you were a newer builder, you wouldn't really know what to do with this. The importance of separation between your ceilings, your walls, and also your floor. And, you know what, I suppose your background walls, but in this instance, it's not really going to matter that much. So here's what I'm talking about. If we take a look at this room, you guys can see that the decoration is good. I think this build is honestly looking pretty cozy, but every block is kind of the same. You know, we have regular wood walls, regular wood ceiling up here, and then regular wood floors. What can we do to separate these to make this build look like it's more solid and has more actual internal structure? Well, for one, there's something super simple that you can do day 1 in your Terraria building, and that is simply to separate whatever floor material you have from your wall material. So in this case, you know, this is probably a day 1 Terraria build, right? We can just simply add some stone blocks here and separate the entire ground into being stone instead of wood. And there we go. It's really that simple to get started. Of course, this is just preference, but I did make it 2 wide instead of just 1 wide for the floor. And similarly, it's just preference on what block you want to use. I'm considering this sort of a day 1 build, so chances are you're probably going to have a bunch of stone lying around. Might as well put that to some use and actually incorporate it into the build. Now, if you were picturing yourself actually living in this house, right? You probably wouldn't want to walk on stone all day as your Terraria character, so of course you can change the block for whatever you want. You can make it completely unique, your own. But in this case, I think already this adds some good separation and makes it look like the build has a bit more of a foundation. And you know what? I did completely forgot about this. I probably should have mentioned this when we were actually talking about the decoration and stuff, but I see a lot of beginner Terraria builders use slopes like this inside their house to kind of separate like different layers of their house. And honestly, it looks fine, but personally for me, I think it would look a lot better if we added a staircase like this, and I somehow put it in the wrong direction, my bad. But just adding a staircase like this, because also this will still feel like it gives a little bit more structure, because if it was just like, you know, the sloped platform, it's kind of like this house isn't really supported and not sitting on like a stable foundation, because it's like, oh, the house is leaning down to the side over here, what's that about? But instead, you can put down a staircase and it's like, oh, okay, this is just maybe a little bit lower section of the room. But going back to the structure, the second and what I believe is the best and also my favorite thing to do to just add structure to these rooms is simply to add in support beams, so it looks like these rooms are actually real rooms in real life that are supported with real beams. And again, you can do that really simply and really easily in the early game Terraria by just giving yourself a bunch of living wood walls. Of course, this is for the wood example. You know, if you were using a different building material to build, then you would probably use a different thing. But in our example here, with just some basic wooden walls, you can use living wood, and where I like to put them is usually kind of on the corners of these rooms, and then depending on the room and the build, I would usually like to add them kind of symmetrically in the middle of the room. However, in our case, we do have these large windows that are kind of blocking some areas. So what I would actually do in this scenario is I might put one right here, kind of separating this window. And what this does is it separates the build again a little bit to the foreground and background. So it looks like there's a wooden pillar here separating the build between this background wall with the window on it and these pillars that might be in the middle of the room. And similarly, you can actually add this same kind of accent, but horizontally if you put some bars on the ground to act like trim in your regular house. So there you go. You can see that this kind of does box in the room a little bit more, but it is also similar to real life, because chances are if you look on your wall right now around you, you'll probably see some trim at the very bottom and possibly even the very top of your walls. Again, for me personally, I don't always add trim to the top of my builds like this, but I will almost always add the trim to the bottom of my builds, because I do just think it generally looks better and makes the wall look a little bit more complete. So let's go ahead and do a very similar thing to this room over here. We're going to go ahead and again put the living wood walls going up to make it look like supporting beams. And in this case, for this room here, we are going to do something very slightly different. We're actually going to support the background window this time with our structural beams. So we're just going to put some beams on the very edges of the window to kind of make it look like maybe these beams are supporting this large window and holding it up, because maybe the background wall wouldn't be strong enough. And by golly, I would say this is looking like a pretty complete Terraria house. There is just one more thing that personally I would probably add to this build, and that is simply some more trim or some more windowsills under these windows. And we can do this super easily by just getting your platform of choice and putting them under each of these window sections. What you can also do, if you want to be a little bit fancy with it, is you can put them directly on the window and simply hammer them into their bottom state, which will block a little bit of the window, but it might look a bit better depending on what kind of build style you're going with. You guys can see them here back to back. It really just depends on what you personally prefer. I think I am going to go ahead and put them on this and then break them down for the sole reason that over here, remember our little bar setup? If I had the platforms right here and here, it would just look a little bit strange, but instead I can put the platform right above this bottle and then hammer it down, and I do think personally that would look a little bit better. Don't worry about that keg, I'll place it back down. And just like that, I would call this Terraria house completely 100% decorated. Now again, if you are a beginner builder, this might look like a lot, but you guys can see, we just broke it down into some simple steps, added decoration wherever we felt like it, and realistically, you do not have to do this much. All you really had to add to this build was a few simple features, like I said before. A nice bench to complement this bookshelf, maybe a smith rack and then a mannequin to complement the furnace, some glass to give your build some windows and natural light, and then if you do have pictures like this guy did, just make a few hanging pictures or just kind of dot them around to make the build generally look a little bit cozier and lived in. But really, that's all you have to do, and I think these are tips that literally anyone could follow, and you can elevate your builds from like a 6 or a 7 to a bajillion, gazillion, million. Okay, probably not that much, but like easily from like a 4 or a 5 to like an 8 or a 9 just by doing these simple steps. So gamers, I think with that build being done, that is going to be the end of this possible first episode today. Big shout out to Kananos, Dexodded, and also Anti-Hater MCU for letting me showcase your builds on my channel and hopefully improve them. You know, I'm really not trying to do this to be mean or to say I'm a better builder than you. I just want to showcase some nice, helpful tips that really anyone can implement. That is absolutely by no means saying I'm a better builder than you. That is not me saying that I think your builds are bad. Yeah, actually, on the contrary, I think these builds are really good, and they could be so insanely good if you just added a few simple tips and tricks that maybe you guys didn't even know about. So gamers, like I said, that is going to be all. If you possibly want this series to continue, then all you got to do is let me know in the comments, like, subscribe, share, favorite. I don't know, I think that's actually all the main ones. I don't know why I'm trying to think of more. And just generally show this video some love. I'm probably going to keep doing this by looking at the Terraria subreddit, but if you guys want me to personally rank or maybe help you guys with some tips on your own builds, then you guys can also hit up my business email. It should be on the information card on my channel. I forgot like where exactly it is on my channel, but I do have my business email linked to my channel, so you guys can go ahead and take a look at my business email if you do want me to rank any of your Terraria builds. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys actually did get some value out of some of my Terraria building techniques. Again, I am not the best builder. I do not claim to be, but I have been building in Terraria for a long time, so hopefully you guys do think my builds are adequate and that these tips are helpful. And gamers, like I said, with that being said, that is going to be all from me for today. So like the video, comment, subscribe, share it around, and I will see you gamers in possibly the next video. Peace.